Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Destiny and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to go ahead and start off with the first video in the e-commerce series. And in this one, we're going to be setting up our projects. We're going to be working with the settings.py files. We're going to be working with the urls.py files. And we're going to set up everything that we're going to be needing to get our projects up and running. So if you want to see my videos like this, do make sure to drop a like, consider subscribing, as it really mean the world to me. And if you want to get the source code for this project, do make sure to check the link in the description below. It should help you get the template. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new project on our desktop over here. And in order to do that, you want to open up CMD. So I'm going to open up command prompts. And if you don't have that over here already, you want to come over to your Windows and type out CMD. And when you type this out, you should go ahead and click on command prompts, and that should open up command prompts for you. So some of the things that you'd be needing for this project is Python and Django. Although we're going to be getting some other packages later, like Pillow, let's say Crispy Forms and other packages. But for now, what I want to get is Python and Django. And in order to see if Python is installed on your PC, just type out Python on your command prompt. And if you see Python 3.9.1 or whatever version is it that you're using, then Python is installed. But if Python is not installed, I want you to head over to their official website and download Python from there and install the executable file on your PC. As simple as that. Okay, so when that's done, the next thing that I'd want you to have is Django. And in order to have Django, all you need to do is make sure you have an active internet connection. Then on your command prompt, pip install Django is gonna install Django for you, and you should be on the right path to start on the project. Okay, so now when we have all this, I simply want to come over to the desktop. So I'm gonna say cd into desktop, and cd means change directory. So I'm changing directory into desktop. So while here on the desktop, I want to go ahead and create a new project, a new Django project. So it's highly recommended that you use a virtual environment while creating new projects and all that. And if you'll be following along with other tutorials in my channel, then you'd know that I highly recommend using virtual environments whenever you want to let's say push to the web, or you want to do something, or there is a new version of Django, your older projects don't get affected. Okay, so I'd highly recommend that. But I'm not going to be using a virtual environment in this video. It's still totally fine, because some of you have asked me, is it necessary, is it compulsory to use virtual environment? Like, is it a must that I should use it in all my videos? And the answer to that is no. If you want to use virtual environments, you need to know what you're using it for. So for example, let's say whenever you want to push to the web, you want to have the list of all the packages that were used to build the exact project. Then you want to use virtual environments. Let's say that you don't want to actually use updated Django versions for a particular project. You just want to stick with Django 1 point whatever. Then using a virtual environment is going to come in handy for that. Else, you don't want to use a virtual environment. So I'm not going to be using the virtual environment, as I said earlier. Now what I'm going to do is simply say Django-admin. So Django-admin is pretty much a Django word. Then I'm going to use a command over here that's called start project. So if I just hit Django-admin and hit enter on my keyboard, now what do you notice? I've got a couple of Django comments over here. There's test server, there's start project, there's start app, there's SQL migrations, there is make migrations and migrate, there's run server. So we're going to be using a lot of this in this tutorial, and you're going to understand what they're doing if you are very new to Django. So for now, the command that I'm looking for is this one that's called start project over here. So this start project command is pretty much going to create a Django boilerplate code for us. It's going to put in the views.py, no, not the views.py. It's going to put in the settings.py, the manage.py, and it's going to give us the base that we need to start creating our project. That's it. Then this other one over here that's called start app. This one is going to create an app for us. So apps are just like components, and when we get to that, I'm going to explain more what they do. So when we've done this, now we want to go ahead and say Django-admin. Then we're going to use the command start project. So the start project is pretty much coming from this one over here, start project. Then the next argument that it takes is whatever you want. So you could call your project whatever you want. In my case, I'm going to call my eCom PRJ. So I like calling my projects. If you take a close look at my projects, like over here on my desktop, you can see chat PRJ. You could see, I'm going to open up my portfolio project. Okay. You could see DJ PRJ, you could see block PRJ, and that's how I like calling my project. Over here you can see Dexaed PRJ. So I like appending PRJ to the end, so I'd know that, okay, this is actually the projects folder. Okay, so you may call this whatever you want, it's totally up to you, but I'm just going to call mine ecom PRJ, and I'd highly recommend you stick with whatever I'm doing in this video so you don't run into errors that might take you a whole lot of time debugging. Okay, so now I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard, and this should go ahead and create a new folder over here. Now if you open this up, you can see what I was telling you, that it's going to create a manage.py, and it's going to create an eCommerce folder and ecom PRJ folder, and it's going to put in all these files in there automatically for you. So I think that's it. Now I'm going to go into that folder, cd into ecom PRJ. Now we are in this folder, so there is a couple of things that we would want to do. I want to keep this folder over here so that you guys will see everything that's going on in it. So the first thing that I'd want to do in here is go ahead and we could create a new application, or we could even just go ahead and run server from now. It's all going to work perfectly well. So let me just try running the server. So if I say python manage.py, so python manage.py run server. So this run server keyword or command is pretty much coming from over here. As you can see, we've got run server, so that's the one we are using now. So okay, this is a little bit large. I'm gonna minimize this. Okay, so now I think my server is running on port 8000. This is it over here. All you need to do is open up your browser. I'm going to open up my browser over here, and I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm pretty much going to come over to port 8000. So if you come over to port 8000, then you see that this is loading up, or like all you could do is just come over here and hit enter on your keyboard for it to actually go ahead and load up all this successfully. So what do you notice? We have our server running on port 8000 and everything is working perfectly well. So before I go ahead and continue, I want to show you guys this over here. So this is just like a back-end step-by-step guide that we're going to be using to build this project. And for now, I think I've got 14 steps. So that means we're going to be, why does my window keep increasing its size? Okay, so right now, as you can see, we've got 14. We're going to be doing all this really cool things here, and in this one we are in setting up the project. So we created a new project, we're going to create a new app. That's the next thing that we're going to do. So to create a new app now, you need to come over here, and we need to break off from the terminal, or rather from the server. Just hit Ctrl+C on your keyboard, and that's going to break off from the server. And in order to go ahead and install the app, all you need to say is python manage.py. Then we're going to use start app. So the start app command is this one that we have here already. You must have guessed that, right? Then after that, you're going to call the app whatever you want. I'm going to call mine core. You could call yours bananas, or you could call it whatever you want, Uncle Bobby. It's totally up to you. But I'm going to call mine core and hit enter on my keyboard. And I'd highly recommend, just as I've said before, to stick with me, to stick with whatever I'm doing so you don't have errors that take time to debug. So when we've got this, now if we open up this folder that we're using, what do you notice? We have a new file over here that's called core. And if you open this up, what do you notice? Now we have some files in here. So these are all automatically generated by Django, the views.py, the tests, the models, the apps, the admin. They are all automatically generated by Django. And we're going to be using all this to work in this tutorial. So when that's done, I'm going to come over here, and as you can see, the next thing that we've got is install app in settings.py. So when all this is done, that's pretty much what we want to do. On my terminal or command prompt, I'm going to hit code, then give a space and hit the period sign and hit enter on my keyboard. Now what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and open up this folder. You remember this folder that we created over here? It's going to go ahead and open up this folder on my code editor, on my default code editor, and that one is Visual Studio Code. So for this tutorial series, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code for the editing and writing of codes. You can use whatever you want. If you take a close look down here, you can see that I've got Sublime Text, I've got brackets, I've got PyCharm, I've got Atom. You could use whatever you want, but I prefer using Visual Studio Code because it gives you way more functionalities and flexibility than Atom or Sublime Text. But don't get me wrong, those are still totally cool. Now when we've done this, let's see the step. Okay, that's installing the apps in the settings.py. And to install the app, you want to open up the ecom PRJ. You want to open up the settings.py, and just over here, I'm going to create a comment rather, and I'm going to call this custom apps. So custom apps, are just going to be the apps that I'm going to be installing for this project. So for this project, we're going to have a couple of apps like user authentication. I'm going to call it user auth. We're going to have core. We're going to have store. We're going to have blog. We're going to have a lot of apps. So hopefully you guys know what apps are now in Django. Apps are just like little components that makes up your project. Okay, so let's say in your project you're going to have different sections like user authentication section. You want to have a blog, you want to have a store. Then all this should be in different apps. Okay, it's highly recommended that you use apps for different sections of your website. So this one that we created over here, that I added over here, is core. And you might be like, okay, should you just type core here or should you type whatever? Now what you need to type in here is whatever the name of your app is. So let's say the name of my app was user auth. Then what you want to type here is user auth. Okay, so when that's all done, I'm going to look at the steps. Now the next thing is to configure the template. And in order to configure the template, firstly we need to configure the static and the media files. Okay, actually we could configure the template for now. I'm just gonna from the top, let's import OS. I'm gonna import OS. Actually, what we need to the thing that we need to do before we before we configure the static and media files is the static folder. So for now we're not going to do that. Let's just go step by step. The next step is configure the template. So import OS at the top, and just down here in the template section in here in the list, I want to say os.path.join. and what do I want to join? I want to join the base directory with a folder that's going to be called template. Okay, so you can call this whatever you want, it's totally up to you. So now when we've installed that, let's look at the next step. Now the next step is to go ahead and configure the static and the media files. And before I go ahead and configure the static and the media files, I want to explain what I did in the template section right now. So firstly, I imported OS at the top, and OS pretty much stands for operating system. Now what I want to do is go ahead and join a folder, join the base directory. So whenever you hear me say something like the base directory or the root directory, then that's pretty much means where your manage.py is sitting, where your database SQLite tree is sitting. That's pretty much what the base directory is. Now in here, we're going to be creating a folder that's going to be called template, and that folder that's going to be called template is where all our index HTML files are going to be living. Okay, so I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to click template and hit enter on my keyboard. As simple as that, no strings attached. So when we've done that, the next step we're going to do from the step, it says we should go ahead and configure the static and the media files. And in order to configure the static and the media files, that one is quite easy. All you need to do is just head all the way down over here till you see this line of code that says static URL. So we want to have a static URL, and alongside the static URL, we want to have a static underscore root. So if you've been following along with my other tutorials in my channel, then you're going to know, okay, this is supposed to be os.path.join. So if you've been following along with my other tutorials, then you'd know that I highly recommend you should configure the static and the media files in the early section of the video, so you don't have errors that's going to take you time to debug or to figure out what's actually wrong. So that's why I'm doing all this in the first tutorial. So in the static roots, I want to pass in os.path.join, and that's just exactly the same thing that we did over here when we did the templates one. But this time around, what we want to do is for a folder that's going to be called static. So any folder that's going to be called static is pretty much where our static files are going to be sitting. Our images, our CSS files, our JavaScript files, our documents, our bootstraps, and all that. That's where they're all going to be sitting. Okay, so when you've done this, another thing that we're going to be needing is a static files directory. So I'm going to say static files underscore des, just like this, should be equal to, then we're going to do the same os.path.join, and this time around you could add it in a string if you want. Take note, you could add all these ones in the list rather if you want. It's totally up to you. You can still get rid of it. It doesn't really mean anything. But as you know, lists in Python takes in more arguments. Okay, it takes in more values, which means if there is a list, let's say I was adding a list over here, where is the part of join, I could put in a comma, right, and say something like hello, and I could put in a comma and say something like 23. I could put in a comma and pass in through, and all this could sit in the list, right? That's it. So you could add this in the list. If you know that that's all the values that you're going to be having, let's say the os.path.join base directory static thing is just the only value that you're going to be having, then there's no need adding it to a list. Okay, but I just want to add it to a list to show you that you have more control to whatever you want to do over here in the settings.py. Okay, so I'm going to say os.path.join, and what I'm joining this time around is base directory, and I'm going to be joining it with a folder that's going to be called static files. So whenever we go ahead and run a command, python manage.py collect static, Django is going to go ahead and collect all the static files that were used in building our project, from the admins to the front end to the back end. It's going to collect all the static files, and this is going to be necessary if you want to deploy to platforms, let's say AWS or Railway in particular. It's going to come in really handy, so I'd recommend you do that. Now let's configure the media files. I'm going to say media URL should be equal to media. Now this one, you could call it whatever you want, just like the static, you could call it whatever you want. It's totally up to you. And what this media URL does is pretty much the URL that we want our media files to go through before we could locate them. Okay, I know that this might be a little bit unclear to you now, but don't worry, I'm going to explain it when we start working with the media files. So alongside the media URL, I also want to add a media root. So a media root is pretty much where all our media files are going to be sitting. So media files are just like the pictures that a user uploads, the product pictures. Let's say a user is trying to upload a product on our e-commerce platform. Whatever image they upload that's related to the products, they are all called media files. Okay, and static files are files that were used in building your site. I think that's the easiest way I could explain it. Okay, so over the join, I'm going to join base directory with a folder that's going to be called media. So now remember when we did the template one, what did we do? We came over here and created a new folder and we called it templates. This time around, I want to create a new folder and I'm going to call it static. So I'm going to come over here, create a new folder, call it static, and also I'm going to create a new folder and call it media. You guessed that right. But for now, I'm not going to be doing that because that's going to happen automatically whenever we go ahead and upload something to our site. Let's say we've built out the functionality to upload images or to upload products, then media files are automatically going to get created, and whatever we are uploading is going to sit in the media file. Okay, so I'm not going to create that manually, just to show you guys that that's going to happen automatically whenever we upload something to our site. So as you can see, that's pretty much what we want to do, and we're going to be working with other things later, but let's see what we've got in our step. So when this is done, it says create new view URLs templates, then run server. But for now, there is a little configuration I'd want to do. Okay, I think we should be doing that in other videos. Let's just go ahead and follow the steps. Now the step says create a new view URLs templates, then run server. So to create a new view, you want to open up the core, you want to come over to the views.py. To create a new view, it's quite easy. I'm just going to say define index. You could call that whatever you want. It's a function name. Okay, and I'm going to pass in the request parameter in here. You know, parameters take in whatever argument. You could call it whatever you want. You could call it bananas, you could call it Uncle Bobby. So it takes in multiple arguments, and you come over here and pass in this. So this passes pretty much tells Django, hey, come on, we are still going to do something there, but we don't want to do anything. If this passes in here, then Django is going to go ahead and throw an error for us. So we just want to pass. We're still going to come back there to do something. Okay, so as I was saying, you could pass in whatever you want into the function as parameters. It's totally up to you what you want to put there, but the main convention is passing in requests. So when that's done, I'm going to go ahead and say return HTTP response. So I'm going to say return HTTP response. That's supposed to be HTTP response. And over here, I'm just going to say welcome. Okay, that should be welcome to my shop. Okay, so when this is done, in order to actually go ahead and view this on our site over here, we need to have what is called URL. Okay, so URL are pretty much what helps us actually route pages. So this that we created over here is a view. Now one of the things that you should know in Django is that Django uses views, uses URLs and templates to actually create a page. Then to create databases, you're going to be using models and all that. So 3 things that you should take out of this video, if you took nothing out, should be this. Whenever you want to create a new page in Django, you should create a view for it. You should create a URL, then it's going to look for a template. Okay, so right now we've created this one. The next thing that it's looking for now is a template. And in order to create a template, what we need to do is come over to Okay, actually, for now, I'm not going to create a template. I'm going to show you guys something that's going to happen, and I'm going to create a template later. But for now, let's say what it's looking for is URL. Now, you would see a lot of people come over to their ecom prj, come over to urls.py, and just, install their URL over here by saying parts. Then that's going to go to the home page, and over here I'm just going to pass an index, but it's going to throw an error because we don't have index yet. We need to go ahead and import it. So I'm going to say from call. So remember, we created the index function in this application called call. And in the call, when you open up the folder, that's all passed in over here. There is this one called views.py. So we're going to say .views.py. But there's going to be an error. And that's because that means you're trying to chain three things over here. You're trying to chain from call.views.py. You want to get something, but there is nothing like that. So because it's a Python file, which is py, you don't need to add a py, okay? So you could get rid of the py, and that's gonna take away the error. So when you open up this views.py now, what do you notice? We have index. So from call.views, we want to import index. Simple as that. I'm going to come over here from core.views. I want to go ahead and import index. So now this is going to be satisfied. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and run my server again. I could say python manage.py, run server. Remember when we did that? So python manage.py, run server, and that's running, but there is a problem. It says the static files there is not a tuple or a list. Okay, so over here in the settings.py, this error is pretty much because this static files thing over here, we need to add it into a list. Okay, so now that it's in the list, it could be a list, it could be a tuple. Now it's going to work. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and refresh. What do you notice? Now it's running. So if I come over here now and refresh this, what do you notice? Now we have welcome to my shop. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. As you can see, the website is all styled up and looking amazing. Just kidding, but we want to go ahead and work with something that's more steep. So in here, this is where we're going to be writing our HTML files. We're going to come over here and do some like h1. Then we're going to say, we're going to close out the h1. Then we're going to say hello there, something like that. Then make sure your server is running. Come over here and refresh. Now what do you notice? We got h1 hello there. But you might have already guessed it right. That if you are not new to Django, that we are not going to be doing this in here because it's really not going to make any sense, because our project is going to be a whole lot untidy, and this doesn't make any sense. So it's actually recommended by Django that you should use a template to do this and not write down all your HTML codes in there. So that's why if you take a close look at the top, then you see that Django by default imports render for you. So you want to use render to render a template. So we're going to say return render, and this render keyword over here is pretty much this one that will pass here, and this return is pretty much coming from the function, because whenever you write a function, you must return something or else there's going to be an error. Even if you don't want to return anything, you could go ahead and return none, and this is still going to satisfy it. Okay, or you could return an empty string. It's totally up to you, but just make sure that you return something, or else you see this is going to throw an error. As you can see now, there is an error over there, and if you check out our terminal, what do you notice? You see that it says expected an indented block. That's a problem. But if you say return none, you can see that this is going to go ahead and satisfy it now, and it's going to run perfectly well. Just hit enter on your keyboard, and as you can see, that's working. So now, but what we want to return is a render, and we're going to pass in request. Now this request is pretty much this one I will pass in there, and in here that's why we want to go ahead and code the name of our template. So I'm going to say core/index.html should be the name of the template. And what does this mean? This means that the template is going to be sitting in a folder called core, and in the folder called core there's going to be a file called index.html. So let's go ahead and satisfy that. Now I'm going to open up template. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it core. And you guessed it right. In the core, I'm going to create a new file in there, and I'm going to call it index.html. Simple as that. Now, if we come over here now and refresh, what do you notice? We are not going to have anything. But in this index.html page, we could come over here and write out our index.html files. I could say something like h1, welcome to my shop right now. And when you come over here and refresh, now what do you notice? Make sure your server is running. Now we see welcome to my shop. So this is where we could go ahead and write out all our index HTML files. We don't need to do that in the views.py any longer. And this one is gonna look a whole lot neater. As you can see, we can do whatever we want in here now, okay? And it looks really amazing. So I think that's gonna be it. This is working perfectly well. Now let's see what's the next thing that we've got in our step. It says and then run server. Okay, we've done all this, but there's one more thing that I'd want to do. I want to go ahead and get rid of this URL thing that we've got over here, because we're going to be adding a whole lot of URL, and we don't want to mess up the main URL file. So I don't know, I just like calling this URL, that's the one that's beside the settings.py. I like calling it the project URL file or the main URL file. So you hear me say that a lot of times in this series. I just want you to know that whenever I say the main URL file or the main project URL file, I'm referring to this one that's staying in the same place where the settings, ASGI, and its PY and PyH are sitting, okay? So when we've done this, I think that's pretty much what I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, just as I said. And now I want to create a new URL file in the core. I'm going to right click and say urls.py. Simple as that. Now take note, you can call this whatever you want, okay? So to show you that you can call this whatever you want, I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to call this bananas. So I hope that's the right spelling of bananas. Yeah, whatever. Then bananas.py. Now what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to say from Django.urls, I want to go ahead and import path just like that. And I want to say from core.views, I want to go ahead and import index. Okay, now I'm going to give this an app name. So app name is core. Hopefully you guys know how this index thing works. Now I'm importing path from Django.urls, and that's because from the main project URL, path was installed and it was used to create this path that helps us access this path over here. So that's why we need to import it over here in our bananas PY.